I never believed in fate, until the moment I saw her standing by the window, looking out at the rain like she was waiting for something. I didn't know what I was getting into, but I knew I wanted it. Wanted her. I stood at the door, my hand hovering over the knob, like my body was telling me to stop. To turn around. To leave it alone. But something else, something far more reckless, pulled me forward. I exhaled quietly, just enough for her to hear, if she was listening. When she finally turned to look at me, her gaze was measured, but not unkind. She wasn't surprised to see me standing there. I'd been hanging around for months, trying not to make it obvious, trying not to look too eager. But every time I came close to leaving, she'd pull me in with just one glance. That's the thing about her, she didn't need to try. She just was. Her smile was soft, hesitant, as if she was debating whether or not to let me in. There was always that tension between us, this unspoken thing that hung in the air whenever we spoke, like a note played too many times without resolution. "You're here again," she said, voice quiet, but not unwelcoming. Her eyes flickered toward the clock on the wall, then back at me. "I told you not to come back." I chuckled, a little nervous. "Yeah, well, you also said I didn't know what I was getting into." Her lips twitched, and for a second, I thought she might say something more. But instead, she just shook her head and leaned against the doorframe. "You don't know." I wanted to tell her I didn't care. That I'd take whatever came with it. The challenge, the complication, the uncertainty, it was all part of it. But I didn't say any of that. I couldn't. There was a part of me that was still trying to convince myself it wasn't this easy. That I wasn't looking at her, not just as someone older, but as someone who held 1,000 little secrets. Someone whose presence had this gravitational pull I couldn't resist. She was in her mid-40s, but there was something about her that made her seem ageless. She dressed casually, always in loose, comfortable clothes, and yet everything about her was effortlessly elegant. There was a quiet grace in the way she moved, the way her eyes flickered between moments like she was trying to figure me out, and I wasn't sure if I was the puzzle or she was. "I'm not some project, you know," she said, breaking the silence. Her voice had a bite to it, but it wasn't harsh. Just enough to remind me that she wasn't here for me to figure out. I stepped a little closer, my heart thumping a little louder in my chest than it should have been. She didn't step back, though. She didn't flinch. And for that split second, I thought I saw a crack in the wall she'd built. "I know," I said quietly. I like being around you. I don't want to leave yet." She studied me with that same unreadable look, her posture stiff but her eyes betraying a hint of something else, vulnerability, maybe, or doubt. "You're young," she said finally, the words almost as soft as a sigh. "You don't know what you're getting into." I wanted to argue, wanted to tell her I did know. That I had more than enough of my own baggage to bring to the table. But the way she said it, it felt like more than just a warning. It was a challenge. There was a sudden quiet, the kind that presses into your ears thick with tension. I knew she was trying to keep me at a distance. And I knew I was too stubborn to back down. I took a small step forward, closer to her. "Maybe I don't know. But I want to." She hesitated, and for a long moment neither of us said anything. Her gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. She swallowed, her throat moving slightly, before she cleared her throat softly. "Stay, then," she whispered, barely audible. And just as I was about to say something, anything, that would keep us in this moment a little longer, the doorbell rang. I jumped, startled, and she pushed off the doorframe, her face unreadable once again. "You should go," she said, her voice firm this time. But it didn't sound like a dismissal. More like a warning. I stepped back, my heart pounding. "I'll be here," I said, even though I had no idea what I was saying. She didn't answer, just turned away to answer the door. I stayed for a moment longer than I should have, watching her retreat, my fingers twitching with the need to do something, to reach out, to stop her. But I didn't. I couldn't. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I realized this was just the beginning. The door clicked shut behind me, and I stood there for a moment in the hallway, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what I was doing anymore. This wasn't supposed to be easy. I wasn't supposed to want this as badly as I did. But her words, her eyes, they kept pulling me back, like gravity, like something I couldn't shake. The soft way she'd said stay, the barely there flicker of vulnerability, the one she always tried so hard to hide. It was like she was daring me to cross the line, but at the same time, warning me not to. I turned and walked down the stairs slowly, my mind heavy with the weight of it all. She was older, sure. That didn't bother me. I'd never been one to care much for age. But there were other things, deeper things. I knew I wasn't the only one carrying baggage. She wore it in the way she carried herself, in the way her shoulders were always just a little too stiff, as if expecting the world to drop something heavy on her any second. I leaned against the banister and sighed, running a hand through my hair. She had a history. I didn't have to ask. Her life wasn't a fairy tale, and I had enough sense to know that her past had shaped the woman she was today. There was something about the way she spoke, like she'd been burned by something before. Maybe someone. She never talked about it, but I could feel it in the silence, in the way she avoided certain questions, in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And then there was me, a guy barely out of his teens, trying to figure out who he was and where he was going. There was nothing to keep me here, nothing keeping me in her orbit except for the pull of her, the feeling that I was being drawn into something I couldn't explain. The idea of us, it was complicated. We were both strangers to each other, wrapped up in our own separate lives. She had her own world, her own history, and I was just trying to find my place in it. But there was that tension, that undeniable connection that flickered between us every time we were close. And I couldn't stop thinking about it. I pushed open the door to the small cafe where we met that first time. It was quiet inside, the hum of the espresso machine and the clink of silverware on plates the only sounds. She was already sitting at a table by the window, her coat draped over the back of the chair, her eyes downcast as she fiddled with her cup. I sat down across from her, my heart pounding a little in my chest. "Did I interrupt something?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She looked up, almost surprised. For a second, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that felt almost like relief. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "No," she said, her voice steady, but a little tight. "I'm just thinking." I nodded, not sure what to say next. I was still trying to figure out how to talk to her, how to navigate the space between us without making things worse. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, knowing that one wrong move could send me tumbling into something I wouldn't be able to get out of. She took a slow sip of her coffee, staring out the window. The sky was overcast, the rain still drizzling down against the glass. "I've been in relationships before," she said quietly, almost as though she wasn't talking to me. "Ones that felt like they were supposed to work, but didn't. And some that I didn't even realize were over until it was too late." Her words hung in the air between us. She didn't look at me as she spoke, but I could see the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers tightened around her cup. She was trying to hold it together, trying not to give too much away. "I know it's not easy," I said, my voice low, but sincere. "I'm not trying to make anything harder." She finally met my eyes, her gaze steady but soft. There was that wariness again, that distance she kept between us, but also something else, a flicker of hope, or maybe just the tiniest sliver of possibility. I wasn't sure. Her hand, so careful and precise in its movements, shifted just slightly. Her fingers brushed against mine barely, but enough that I felt the contact ripple through me. I swallowed hard, my breath catching. "Maybe you're right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maybe this is risky. But sometimes I don't want to be safe. The words hung in the air, and for a moment neither of us moved. Her touch lingered in my mind, even as she pulled her hand away. I could feel her uncertainty, the same one I was hiding beneath my own calm surface. But neither of us was ready to break the silence. We sat there, suspended between the lines of what was and what could be, and I knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever be the same after this moment. The moment the door swung open, I felt the world shift. I didn't know if it was the way she stiffened, her breath catching, or the way my pulse sped up at the sound of that knock. But it was real now. It wasn't just us in the quiet, little cafe anymore. Her eyes darted to me, a flash of something I couldn't quite read. Panic? Regret? Or maybe guilt? She didn't say anything, just stood up a little too fast, as if trying to distance herself from whatever it was that was hanging between us. The tension from earlier, the brush of her fingers against mine, the soft words, the way we had both held our breaths, it all felt like it had cracked something wide open. Then, the man walked in. I didn't know who he was at first, just another guy, dressed in a suit that was maybe too formal for a place like this. His expression was stern, but there was something familiar about the way he looked at her, like he had every right to be here. And when he said her name, my stomach dropped. Rachel, he said, his voice low and too easy. I didn't think I'd find you here. I could feel the blood leave my face as I looked at her, her stiff posture, the way her mouth went tight. She wasn't just Rachel. Not to him. I could see that now. I stood up instinctively, my chest tightening. It wasn't like I had any claim on her, but the sight of him made me feel small. Like I had intruded on something I had no business being near. She turned toward him, her voice soft, but I could hear the edge in it. Jared, she said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. What are you doing here? The guy, Jared I assumed, gave me a quick glance, the corner of his mouth curling in some kind of recognition. I'm here to talk, he said, his eyes lingering just a second too long. We need to sort some things out. Rachel shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. She wasn't even looking at me now. Instead, she focused on the man in front of her. I should have left. I should have just walked out, but I couldn't. Every part of me was screaming to go, but I was rooted to the spot. Like if I left now, I'd be admitting something I wasn't ready to face. Jared took a step closer to her, and I could see how her body tensed, like she was trying to keep herself from recoiling. There was history there, I could tell. Things unsaid. Things I didn't want to know but knew I had to. You never told me you were meeting someone, Jared said, his gaze flickering over to me again. He wasn't subtle, and that made everything feel worse. Rachel cleared her throat, a small, frustrated sound. We're just talking, she said, forcing the words through a tight throat. But I could see the way her hands tightened into fists at her sides. I should have walked away. I knew that. But there was something that kept me here, something that kept me standing, waiting. A desperate part of me wanted to run. But another part, the part that had been getting closer to her, the part that had felt her hand brush mine, the part that had felt everything between us, couldn't leave without knowing what this was. Jared wasn't stupid. He turned to me fully now, eyeing me like I was a threat, a challenge. The way he looked at me made me want to shrink back, but I didn't. Instead, I stayed rooted to the spot. Rachel's eyes flicked nervously between us, and I caught the briefest glimpse of something in her face. Shame? Fear? The look of someone caught between two worlds. I should go, I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. My hands felt clammy. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I turned to leave, but as my fingers brushed the door, Rachel's voice stopped me. Don't go, she whispered, too softly for anyone else to hear. I froze. Her words felt like an anchor, pulling me back, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. Not with Jared standing there, and not with whatever was brewing between us still hanging in the air. But then, something unexpected happened. She stood up, the chair scraping across the floor loudly, her eyes wide and frantic. "Jared," she said, her voice trembling. "This isn't what it looks like." Jared smirked, shaking his head. "Doesn't it?" I could hear the rawness in her voice, the urgency. And suddenly I knew, whatever was happening, we were both in it now. Both of us, tangled in something that was getting harder to resist by the minute. I could feel her standing behind me, her breath just inches away. My skin buzzed. The space between us was electric, dangerous. A part of me wanted to turn around and grab her, pull her close, but the other part, the part that knew how wrong it was, how impossible this was, held me back. But she didn't step away. And as my hand hovered over the door, I knew this was no longer about choice. It was about need. The air between us was thick, too heavy to breathe, and the more I tried to hold it together, the more I felt myself unravel. Jared stood too close to her, his hand on her arm, and the way she tensed beneath his touch made something twist in my chest. I wanted to look away, wanted to make this all stop, but I couldn't. Not when every second felt like I was losing her, like I was about to disappear into the background of something I wasn't ready for. "Rachel, please," Jared said, his voice smooth and too confident. "Don't make this harder than it already is." Her fingers dug into her palms, her whole body stiff, but she didn't pull away. She didn't stop him. That was the part one couldn't swallow. "I'm not making it anything," she said quietly, the words brittle, cracked with emotion. She wasn't even looking at him anymore. Her gaze flickered to me instead, and I saw it then, the hesitation. The conflict. The same thing that had kept me tethered to this mess. She wanted to pull away. But she couldn't. And neither could I. I stood there, frozen, my heart beating too fast, every nerve screaming at me to do something. Anything. To stop this, to fix it, to finally face whatever was happening between us. But all I could do was watch. Watch as she tried to hold it together. Watch as Jared's thumb traced circles on her skin, too casual, too familiar. It was like a knife in my chest, that touch, that unspoken ownership. "I don't think you should be here," Jared said, his eyes narrowing, suddenly shifting to me with that same condescending look. "This isn't your place." I felt the words slam into me, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest, threatening to spill over. Everything in me wanted to lash out, to tell him exactly what I thought of him. But I didn't. I couldn't. Rachel's hand moved, almost instinctively, as if she was trying to stop whatever was happening, but she didn't quite reach me. The moment we'd shared before, that brief, fleeting touch, felt like a dream now. A dream that was slipping further and further out of reach. "Jared, please," she said, her voice shaking, finally pulling her arm out of his grip. It was like watching someone finally breathe after holding their breath for too long. But then she looked at me, and I saw it. That fear. That regret. That thing I couldn't place but knew was there. The table between us felt like a canyon, an impossible distance. I wanted to tell her I was here, that I wasn't going anywhere. That I could make it right, whatever this was. But the words wouldn't come. And as I opened my mouth, I realized I was afraid too. Afraid of what might happen if I said the wrong thing. Afraid of losing her forever, or worse, pushing her into the arms of a man who could give her everything I couldn't. The silence in the room stretched long, heavy. And then it broke. Rachel stepped forward, her eyes locked on mine, her breath shallow. Her hand reached out, not for Jared, but for me. "Don't walk away," she whispered, her voice raw, desperate. And for the first time, I let myself move. I crossed that distance, closing the space between us, my heart hammering in my chest. Jared's voice snapped out sharp. "Rachel, don't." "He's not." But I didn't care. I didn't care about him. I didn't care about anything except the way her fingers brushed mine, the way her lips parted slightly as if she was about to say something, something that could change everything. I could feel the weight of it, feel everything hanging in the balance. She could pull away. She could shut this down. Or she could step into it, step into me. And neither of us knew what would happen if we did. My eyes dropped to her lips. I could see it, see how she was holding herself together, trying to be strong, trying to make a decision that neither of us was ready for. My fingers brushed her jaw, just a touch, barely enough for her to feel, and for a second, we both just stood there, frozen. But then the door swung open again. The world outside came rushing in. The door slammed open, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't the man I'd been expecting. It wasn't Jared. It was her. My mother. The shock of seeing her standing there, framed in the doorway with that familiar, quiet authority, hit me like a wave. Her eyes were fixed on Rachel, then flickered to me, sharp, calculating. The silence that followed felt suffocating. My entire body went rigid, a part of me already knowing what was coming, but unable to stop it. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, betraying the panic I felt rising in my chest. I never thought I'd see her here. Never. Her lips pressed together in a thin line, then softened, just slightly, as she stepped further into the room. She glanced at Rachel, then back to me, her expression unreadable. "What the hell is going on?" I asked, the words coming out too quickly. I didn't even want to know, but I had to. I had to understand. Rachel stiffened beside me, her breath catching in her throat. She looked from my mother to me, then back again, her face pale. The weight of everything was suddenly too much. I could feel my skin burning with embarrassment, fear, and something else. Betrayal. "Rachel," my mother said coolly, her gaze lingering for a moment longer than necessary. "I didn't expect to see you here." Rachel's eyes widened, a flush creeping up her neck. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. For the first time, I saw her falter, and it made something twist painfully in my chest. "You know each other?" I asked, the question coming out more like a statement. My mind was reeling, piecing together the strange feeling I'd had when I first met Rachel, the distance she kept, the unspoken history she tried so hard to hide. Rachel cleared her throat, her voice shaky. We met through some mutual friends," she said, but her words felt hollow, rehearsed. My mother didn't say anything at first. She just stood there, her arms crossed tightly, staring at Rachel. But I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of recognition. The knowing. "I'm surprised," she finally said, her tone sharp. "You didn't mention your connection to him." My heart skipped a beat. The weight of her words, the implications, sank in. Connection? What was she talking about? Rachel's face went white. I could see her trembling slightly, like a leaf caught in the wind, ready to be blown away. The truth was there, hanging between us, but neither of us knew how to say it. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice low and tense. The look on my mother's face was the last thing I expected. She didn't look like someone who had just discovered a secret. She looked like someone who had known it all along. Like she'd been waiting for me to find out. "Did you really think I wouldn't know, Adam?" she said, her eyes cutting through me. "That I wouldn't figure out who she was?" I froze, my blood running cold. It felt like everything around me had gone quiet, like the world had shifted and I was standing on the edge of something dangerous. Rachel finally spoke, her voice so small that it barely reached me. "Adam, I didn't want this. I didn't want you to know." "Know what?" I asked, my words clipped, the desperation creeping into my voice. I had no idea what was happening anymore, no idea how things had spiraled so fast. "My mother," Rachel said, her eyes darting to the floor, her face flushed with shame. She's your mother's best friend." I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me. Her mother? My mind couldn't process the words. The woman I'd been falling for, the one who had been everything I never thought I needed, was tied to my mother in a way I hadn't anticipated, in a way that made everything feel like it had been orchestrated from the beginning. My gaze shot to my mother, but she was already moving toward the door, shaking her head like this whole thing was too much to bear. "You both have no idea what you're getting yourselves into," she muttered before walking out, leaving a suffocating silence in her wake. Rachel didn't move, didn't speak. She just stood there, eyes closed, shoulders slumped in defeat. And in that moment, everything came crashing down. What had started as a spark between two people who weren't supposed to want each other had become something else entirely. The weight of it was too much to bear. Everything had changed. I should have pulled away. I should have known better. But instead I stepped toward her, my heart pounding in my chest. "I don't care," I whispered, my voice hoarse with emotion. "I don't care about any of it." She looked up, her eyes filled with something like regret, but also something else. A flicker of hope. A flicker of us. "I'm sorry," she said, but the words felt empty, as if she was apologizing for something that was beyond her control. And in that moment, I didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to fix this. All I knew was that I couldn't walk away. The door slammed shut behind my mother, leaving an eerie silence that filled the room like a thick fog. I couldn't hear anything. Not Rachel's shallow breaths. Not my own heartbeat, loud and frantic in my ears. The world outside felt distant, muffled. All I could focus on was the woman standing in front of me. The woman I thought I understood, the one who had made me laugh, who had made me feel like I wasn't just some lost kid caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But now, everything about her seemed different. Her mother. Her mother. I hadn't known. I couldn't have known. And now, I felt like a fool for letting myself believe in something that had been built on a lie. Rachel was still standing there, her hands trembling at her sides. Her face was pale, her lips pressed together in a thin line as if holding everything back. But I saw it. I saw the vulnerability, the fear, the hurt she was trying so hard to hide. "I never meant for this to happen," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass. "I never meant for you to find out this way." I wanted to scream. I wanted to pull her into my arms and tell her everything would be okay, that it didn't matter who her mother was, that none of this changed what we had. But I couldn't. Because it did matter. It mattered in a way I hadn't understood until now. Her mother had been in my life for years. She had watched me grow, seen the boy I had been, and now she was watching me fall for her best friend's daughter. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the chaos inside me. "So what now? Is this it?" My voice cracked, betraying the hurt I felt. "Is this where we just stop? Because it's too much for you?" Rachel's eyes met mine, full of unshed tears. "No," she said softly, but there was no conviction in her words. "I don't want it to be over." But her hands were still shaking, her eyes darting away from me. She couldn't meet my gaze, and that hurt more than anything. Because I knew her. I knew the way her eyes softened when she looked at me, the way she leaned in just a little too close when she spoke. I knew she felt it too. But this had changed everything. I wanted to reach for her. To take her hand, to show her that I didn't care about her mother or the mess we were in. But I didn't. I couldn't. "Then what the hell are we doing?" I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "We can't just pretend this doesn't matter. This isn't just some fling, Rachel. This is real. This is us." She finally looked at me then, her eyes wide, searching. "I don't know what to do, Adam. I'm scared. I'm scared of what this means. What it could mean. Then let me help you." My voice was desperate now, raw with emotion. "Please, just let me help. I don't care about the mess. I don't care about the complications. I care about you. The room felt like it was closing in on us, the tension so thick I could barely breathe. She stepped back, her face crumpling in a way I wasn't ready for. I don't want to hurt you, she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper. You already have, I replied, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. And I've already hurt you too. But we're here, Rachel. We're here right now, and that's all we can control. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. She pressed her lips together, as if she was fighting herself, fighting whatever had been holding her back. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this, she whispered. For us. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Us. We weren't strong enough. We couldn't fight the weight of all this history, all the things that had been done before we even met. But there was something in her voice, something in the way she was looking at me, that desperate, uncertain look, that told me she wasn't ready to walk away. Not completely. And maybe that was enough. Maybe it's not about being strong enough, I said, stepping toward her, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself. Maybe it's just about being honest. Maybe it's about letting it all fall apart if it has to, but still trying. For the longest time, we just stood there. Neither of us moving, either of us speaking. The room was heavy with everything unsaid, with all the things that should have been resolved. But we both knew something now. Something real. Adam, she whispered, but her voice trailed off, too soft to finish. I closed the distance between us then, my hand reaching for hers, brushing against her fingers with more tenderness than I had ever allowed myself. I don't have all the answers, I said, but I know I don't want to walk away from this. From you? Her breath caught in her throat, and for the briefest moment, I thought she was going to pull away. But instead, she pressed her forehead to mine, her hands finally meeting mine in the quiet of the room. It wasn't a kiss. Not yet. But it was enough. It had been weeks since that night, the night everything had nearly shattered. The silence between Rachel and me had become something we were both learning to navigate, but it wasn't easy. We hadn't spoken much after the confrontation with my mother, but every moment had been a choice. A choice to fight or to run. And in those days, running hadn't felt like an option. We'd come to terms with the complexity of it all. Slowly, piece by piece, we tried to rebuild what had been broken, not perfectly, but real. What had once felt like a runaway train now felt like something we could hold, if only we were both brave enough to keep going. Rachel had pulled away, and I had too. But each day, we found ourselves inching closer, like magnets, drawn together by something we couldn't name, but felt deeply. The guilt, the fear, it hadn't disappeared, but neither had our need for each other. She came to my apartment one evening, knocking on the door like she hadn't been there every other night before. She stood in front of me, not speaking, just holding the space between us, her eyes searching mine. I thought I had to walk away from this, she said, her voice softer than I remembered. I thought it was the only way. But I don't want to. I didn't know how to answer her, not at first. But when I opened my mouth, the words were simple. Truthful. I don't want either. My hands found her face without thinking. My thumb traced the curve of her jaw, just to make sure she was real. That we were real. I've been scared, she admitted, her eyes meeting mine with something raw. I didn't think I could be this vulnerable. I didn't think I could love someone who could make me lose control. But now, I don't want to stop feeling this way. Even if it's messy. Even if it hurts. We had both been dancing around it for so long, the fear of what it meant, the weight of everything we couldn't change. But maybe it wasn't about fixing things. Maybe it was just about being real with each other. I smiled softly, pulling her closer, feeling her warmth against me, the steady rhythm of her breath. Then let's not stop. The truth was, we didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held for us, for me, for her. The age difference, the complicated histories, it didn't make sense, and neither of us had an answer for how we were supposed to move forward. But we knew we couldn't go back. And that was enough. As the days passed, we carved out a place for us, messy, imperfect, but ours. The moments weren't always easy. There were tears. There was guilt. There were moments when I thought I couldn't do it anymore. But there were also those moments where she would look at me, and I would see something in her eyes that made me believe in us, despite everything. "I don't know where we're going, Rachel," I said one night, as we lay on the couch together. "But I don't want to do it without you." And maybe that was the most honest thing I'd ever said. I didn't need the answers. I didn't need to figure it all out. I just needed her. The rest could wait. The world had changed between us, but in a way, it had only made us stronger. We had chosen each other, despite everything. Despite the mess, despite the fears. We had chosen love. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next?